Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Underlords Pro Season 3 Grand Finals. I'm your host, Tinman354, joined here by Blue Sapphire. Blue Sapphire, how are you doing today?
Doing amazing, especially since the patch dropped just before the finals. Now, usually, a patch dropping before a finals kind of sucks for the players, but it's actually quite nice to and refreshing to see this new patch because again, there's quite a lot of new metas diverging just because again this patch was so directed, I should say, right?
Yeah,
It
for
was
sure.
so many.
We know that many of these top players had been a little bit maybe bored, maybe a little bit burnt out with the previous meta. There was a lot of similar builds going on, and a little bit or very little diversity. And the new patch really is shaking things up a whole lot. I know I was casting the duos tournament last night, and we saw tons of different builds. So I'm sure we're in for a big treat today with lots of different builds. I want to start talking about the big changes to the namesake characters, the Underlords themselves. Obviously, before the patch, Essex was one of the most popular, kind of the default pick. You would often see 7 or 8 Essex in a lobby, and now it seems a lot more balanced. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, in my opinion at least, I think Anisix did require like maybe an adjustment for her break, but I didn't think she really needed that heal nerf necessarily. Again, I think her specialty is the early game, right? That heal doesn't really scale as hard as a lot of what Hobgen does. And in fact, actually, want to get to Hobgen here in a moment, but Anisix I feel like is still viable, but again, she didn't need those nerfs. I think she was okay as it is. Again, adjustments maybe on the break would have been fine. But yeah,
Yeah.
at the moment, I don't think she's an insta lose pick. I think she's still reasonably good to consider, especially when you have a certain play style. Of course, there are those that play defensively and those who want to play Hopkins. So,
Yeah,
there are two things there.
for sure. The Essex, I think break kind of needed to get nerfed, not because it was on an Essex, just because as a general game mechanic, it felt a little too
Strong, yeah.
punishing. Yeah, too strong, too punishing to say, hey, I'm going to build up this great unit with these awesome alliances. I mean, alliances really are kind of the core focus of the game. That's the whole point, is building alliances together, and just having this very easy ability to just completely dismantle that, I think was a little bit. Maybe bad design, or like feels bad kind of design. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that changed for sure. And
I think sorry, initially
good.
initially when I heard about break, right, I thought it only meant the passive of the unit. I didn't actually know it broke the alliance passives, and until of course the gameplay changes
Yep.
mentioned that.
Yep.
And I was so surprised that it actually did that because I thought that only Doom did that, because it would make perfect sense that Doom does that. Just for reference sake, in Dota, Doom is the end all be all. If you're doomed, you do absolutely nothing,
Yeah,
and I
I
did
agree
not
with
know,
that.
and I didn't think an E6 would do that. I thought that was a Doom thing, and essentially, when I realized, I was like, wow, that is actually pretty strong. I did not know it actually just completely nullified a unit from the game. Like it's not, it doesn't feel great when you're essentially isolated from the rest of their composition, right? And so I
Yeah, for
completely
sure.
agree.
Especially
Um,
because there is a power discrepancy between alliances, and I think some alliances or some units are heavily balanced around the fact that their alliances are very strong. I think scrappy units are a good example. Things like Clockwork and Timbersaw, they're not quite as powerful just on their own, but the scrappy bonus, that bonus armor, that bonus regen, is very impactful. And so whenever those units kind of became a lot less viable whenever break was so impactful, but now that we see break kind of taken down a notch, you're going to start seeing those builds that rely on those very powerful alliances start to come back into the meta.
yeah, absolutely right. I do want to see Scrappy back into the meta. I don't think it's a horrible alliance at all. I genuinely think they are pretty solid. Unfortunately, Tinker is banned, but we'll get to that.
Yeah,
But Scrappy's I think aren't really as bad as they were. Rather, just everything around them has just become better. I think is the main reason there, right? Scrappy hasn't really been adjusted in quite a while, so
yeah, they
yeah,
haven't been
it's more
hit at
about
all.
yeah, it's more so that everything else around them got a buff or their alliances got improvement. Scrappy's literally not changed at all, not even pre-patch. Like they've they've been untouched by the developers, and I'm not sure if that was an oversight or they just didn't have anything to add into that alliance. But yeah, they absolutely have had no adjustments. So it's good
Well,
to see them slowly crawl back in.
Well, certainly, speaking of alliances that have not seen adjustments, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we saw Warriors and Heartless, kind of the two most prominent alliances before the patch. They got hit pretty hard. The Warrior buff went from 10 armor at 3 Warriors down to 7, and Heartless from 5 armor shred down to just 3 armor shred. And that hurts some very common compositions.
Yeah, in the early game, that's absolutely devastating, right? That's seven. That's 3 extra armor, which is, I believe, another 8% physical reduction. I think it's less than that. I think it's like 6 or 5%.
I think so. It kind of depends on exactly what your armor total
Yeah.
is, but it's somewhere in that range, somewhere around the 8 to 10% range.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the heartless nerf, of course, means that early game armor reduction is even worse now. But I guess that's to compensate for everybody, right? And I did talk about this a few weeks back, right? When I saw brutes and what they would do, I said brutes would become a pseudo warrior. So if a warrior strategy is no longer functioning, then the brutes would be the new frontline. But that never happened because warrior armor was just too strong, and the armor alliance, most of the units in that alliance are very strong. So brutes just didn't stand a chance. In fact, they moved Doom, which again I thought was probably one of the strongest units because again that Doom just removes you from the game. Didn't really change anything. I guess that's more so to thank Anesix for that because again Doom was kind of useless at that point.
Yeah, it was a
But
little redundant to all the break
yeah,
from an Essex for sure.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I guess one of the things I thought about brutes was like a problem before the patch was, and I don't think the patch really solved this problem, was brutes are very weak to ranged damage. They are very good at shutting down the damage sources that are right in front of them, that they're in melee range of. Whereas warriors had the bonus armor, so they were just good at shutting down damage from all sources. So if your opponents had hunters in the backline, or the ever-present Arc Warden was in the backline and just dealing damage to you, your brutes were basically taking full damage. They had no defenses against that until they punched through those tanky frontliners. And the warriors were able to defend against that. But now we've seen pretty massive buffs up to brutes. Their damage reduction essentially doubled, or from 15% up to 30% at just 2 brutes. And they deal a bit more damage. And I think brutes have become a very powerful force in the new meta, even though Doom is in jail today.
Yeah, their front line has been definitely improved, right? But I think that's a lot of cases with melee units. I think why warriors survive it very long because, as you say, their armor buff just basically keeps them alive long enough. But if you notice, a lot of melee units do need those resistances because range units are just inherently stronger in Dota Underlords. Again, because they're ranged, they keep far away, they can attack immediately. In most cases, right? While melee units have to push forward, that gives time for the range units to do their damage. And with this brute buff, it will definitely help, right? Push forward. And I think, to a lesser extent, I think brute attacking assassins may be something that could be considered, right? Because that's a lot of reduction on an assassin. That's 30% their crit, 30% their damage output in general. So
yeah, and that's just at 2 brutes. If you get up to the 4 brutes, which most players who are playing brutes definitely want to get up to all 4, that's a 70% damage reduction. And so I think that's a really good matchup for brutes. And you kind of see a little bit of a rock paper scissors develop in the meta where somebody like a build like assassins are also very strong. We haven't talked too much about them, but assassins were kind of strong before this balance patch, and they were untouched, and a lot of the competition got nerfed. So assassins look to rise up. But then when they jump in on brutes, the brutes shut them down very hard. But on the flip side, you develop this, like I said, rock, paper, scissors, where brutes are weak to hunters because, they have struggled getting to the backline of hunters. But then hunters are very weak to assassins who just jump in and kill the squishy hunters really quick. So that'll be interesting to see how that kind of rock, paper, scissors dynamic develops throughout this tournament if we see people going for different builds like that.
I do want to see that the rock, paper, scissors meta develop. Once again, pre-patch, it existed, right? We saw it everywhere. If you played a certain strategy against a certain composition, you would lose just because your composition was just not suited for that kind of battle, and you kind of hope that the opposing player who counters your opponent, who counters you, would take them out for you, and then you'd have that inherent competition there, right? And that was again, that's what I kind of hope to see eventually back into Dota Underlords, because I feel that's how a lot of Dota things are operating. Is that it does everything is broken, but everything counters everything, so everything is balanced, and that's usually the fun part, right? Is that
Yeah.
you have to just understand where you're standing. Like if you're against 5 mages and you just play scaled, and then suddenly you are the biggest baddie in the room, and you have to worry about that one person who decided to counter you. So it's absolutely all about. I do want to see rock paper scissors again, and we almost forgot to mention when we were talking about Underlords. By the way, Hobgen, a lot of stuff going on there, right? I'd like to mention Lethal Fire, right? I think
Yeah.
Lethal Fire is the equivalent to a Nisix pre-nerf break. I am gonna say that right now.
Really? That is
Fire,
a big claim. Go on.
yeah, yeah. As someone who is a Hobgen spammer, the
Hmm.
biggest your biggest problem early game is the fact that nothing will die, right? They will
Yeah.
either survive at 1 HP or they will just not die at all.
Yeah.
And to offset that, I had units that would deal tick damage. Rather, they will deal one instance of damage just from collateral, right? Nyx Assassin is good collateral. Insects are good collateral. Other things like that. Not even insects. Weaver with his basically any AOE that does just a minor instance of damage, it will be enough to pick something off, right? And with this Lethal Fire, Hobgen doesn't need that anymore. You can practically play normal strategies. Well, I say normal, but anything that you would see in a standard an E6 build back in the day with Hobgen, and you'd be fine, because again, fire is now lethal, which means if Explosivo is cast, which is again has been reduced, and it drops your enemy to just to die to the output damage of the fire, then your units don't really have to worry about that. And in fact, that's essentially another damage outsource that you potentially have use for, right? And that's again, I think Lethal Fire was something he really needed to just
I totally
like
agree.
fight a Nisix. And again, I say that claim because as someone who's again experienced how Hobgen operates, his problem was the early game, and because Lethal Fire exists now, his early game is much easier to operate, and
Absolutely.
it's the gateway to learning how to play Hobgen is open to many players. And I think again, I mentioned this a lot when I was talking about Hobgen, is that people just don't want to bother trying to win the early game on Hobgen because it's too hard. It's just
Yeah, and
it can't be.
Essex was so dominant in that early game, and it'd be so hard to get him going. But he definitely has very powerful late game. I know Keep It Secret is arguably a little bit overpowered. One of his level 30 talents that silences all enemies who are on fire. That was always kind of the claim to fame of Hobgen even before the balance patch. But now that he has a bit more of a solid early game, you really start to see that dominate some of the late game fights.
Yeah, and that's where my concern comes from, right? Because now Anisix doesn't have that step up on Hobgen, which means that Anisix late game is just worse, and they're equal in the early game, which means that she's no up on Hobgen, which is something I'm concerned about. Hopefully, she gets another up, right? I'm not sure if it's gonna be the early game again, because again, when they tried to do that, they tried to give Hobgen the late game and then NE6 the early game, but then people were like, "Nah, if we win the early game, it doesn't even matter if Hobgen comes online," which makes sense because that's usually how it goes anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely want to see some new strategies or just some new changes to NE6 that will potentially give her an upper hand on Hobgen. Something I would love to see actually is perhaps making something. This might be a little bit too OP, but something invulnerable. Like for like a couple of seconds, maybe just like a minor thing. Because Hobgen does have that silence, and I don't think it's comparable to make something invulnerable for 2 seconds. To something like Helm of the Undying, like maybe give her that as an
Interesting.
ability, because I believe she has Enthrall in that Golem, and that
Yep.
Golem is not very good in my opinion. I haven't seen it done any
Um,
work whatsoever.
it does seem a little bit weak. I've seen a lot of people pick it up, and it seems to be impactful sometimes. But you're right. Just on the surface of it, it doesn't do a ton. I definitely think it gets a lot better whenever you get the crash ability. That when it summons, it stuns in an area around it. So that's kind of like a good, kind of like a Kunkka boat, really, that you get to cast on that a little AOE stun when he summons. But Yeah, I definitely think the NSX talents in the later game, especially the ultimates, are a little bit lackluster, certainly compared to Hobgins. That being said, I am we're currently sitting in the lobby waiting to get everybody going here, and you can kind of see what Underlords people are picking, and we see a preference towards Hobgins so far, but there are a couple of NSX players, so definitely not NSX is out. I know we've been talking about how she's a little bit lackluster, but I think in the duos tournament we were playing last night, there's about a 60-40 split between Hobgin and an Essex, and that is a much better split than we saw, 99-1 split before the patch of an Essex to Hobgin. So much closer in terms of balance for sure.
I think it's because there are obviously people who fell in love with an E6 just as I fell in love with Hobgin's like playstyle, right? Everyone just has their preference, and as we get closer into that middle point, like the meniscus, I should say, right, where they're just rightfully so, they both have their ups and downs. We will definitely see players who actually have a preference for each each underlord, and then again, hopefully, obviously, it won't always be a 50 because again, people will have preferences, but a good thing to see is when there's diversity, and obviously when there's diversity, that's when the underlords definitely do shine. And it's going to be super exciting to see what plays out here.
For sure. So as we're waiting for the last couple people to get in, or we might hop to a different group. Well, actually, let's see if we can hop over to a different group here that may be ready to go. Let's hop over to Group B real quick, and let me get the lobby code for that. Let's talk a little bit while I'm getting these set up. Let's talk very quickly about the jail that is on today. We've got
absolutely.
We've got a pretty impactful jail. We've got two of the big hitters. We've got Arc Warden and we've got Doom. Two very popular picks are currently in jail today.
Absolutely right. Arc Warden, I don't think a lot of former fan favorite, I would say, right? Because now his clone does. So technically, Arc Warden now only does 150% damage, technically speaking, like mathematically, because again, his clone no longer does the full brunt of the damage. But that doesn't mean he can't equip items. So if that was really the case, where items were the key to Arc Warden, then we probably won't see that change much. Obviously, again, Arc Warden is 150. Always does 150% of his actual damage because the clone just does damage as well. But yeah, definitely less Arc Wardens I've been noticing. Troll Warlord as well got nerfed, just to highlight that as well. So the entirety of the late game builds have been toned down just to give opportunities to the more 3-star oriented compositions. And as you mentioned, Doom, right? Doom. If Doom was banned a patch ago, I would say it doesn't matter because it's whatever. An E6 will take care of that, right? But no, now Doom is banned, which means your Dragon Knight does nothing now no longer exists. So
all right, yes, definitely. So it looks like we've got into game here on Group B. They've started up. I've already gone through the initial creep rounds and are on round 5. Since our other group has taken a little bit long to get in. So we've got Blazed, Amethyst 7, Croak TV, Glucose, Momo Ring, Spieler TG, G Ryslin, and Alexa all in this lobby. So a pretty stacked lobby. I mean, obviously every player in this tournament is among the best players in the world right now. Any particular player you're interested in watching in this lobby?
Funny thing is, I pretty much know every name in this lobby, which is kind of amazing because again, I kind of expected to know a lot, but I've seen all of these names before. They've all been top at any point in the Underlords Pro League. But I think I would love to look at potentially a G Ryslin, and I think Alexa would be good at the moment.
All right, so let's start with G Ryslin. Only because the highest ranked player in the lobby, currently ranked 7 in the world, G Ryslin, Lord ranked number 7, did start 0-2 so far, but of course early losses are not the end of the world by any means. And we see G Ryzen is starting off with a 3 warrior and 2 troll composition. I've been seeing a lot more splashes of 1 or 2 trolls here. They've got a Shadow Shaman and a Bat Rider along with Pudge, Slarder, and Tusk. Or Tiny Slarder and Tusk, rather.
Yeah, I mean, the warriors being nerfed doesn't mean that they're not good early game, right? They're still super useful. that armor is still very relevant. They haven't nerfed it to the point where warriors are just completely bad because again, there's quite a lot of them. So nerfing that alliance passive just really sucks. So at the moment, and during that fight, even though it was a small sample size. You notice how much damage output Hobgin does, and that's usually that's what I want to see, right? Is Hobgin doing damage, and that's what Hobgin's all about. And I did want to highlight this is all, an entirely Hobgin based lobby, which again I don't agree with. Okay, I love Hobgin, but I'm gonna say the same thing with an E6. I do want people to pick an E6 because then that keeps variety going. But again, it's up to preference. Maybe coincidentally we have 8 people who want to play Hubgun now.
Yeah, like I said, in the as we were trying to get into lobby A, we saw 4 or 5 of them going for Hobgen and the rest going for an Essex. So there's still definitely a good mix there, I would say. This lobby in particular is going for a bit more Hobgen, but that's no matter.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, only only some of them will progress, so technically the number of Hobguns will go down. But at this point in time, right, we want to focus on the player a little bit. And G Ryzen, again, as you mentioned, top 7 in the world right now, and looking very solid. Slowly climbing, lost the first round, but not really a problem.
Yeah, started off 0-2, but then has turned it around, has used some of those free rerolls to kind of spring back in the game, has gotten 2 stars on the Shadow Shaman and the Tiny, and Shadow Shaman was a unit that I've always kind of, or was always kind of a joke, Shadow Shaman tier unit was very bad, but he's definitely been picked up. He's been buffed several times. His Hex lasts 6 seconds at 2 star, but only has a cooldown of 8 seconds, so you're almost permanently locking down a target with that Hex.
If you have an Octarine Essence, you can actually literally hex someone for life. So just FYI. Actually, no, I don't think Shadow Shaman is allowed to hex the same unit twice. So that means you'll hex 2 people for life, which is quite unfortunate for the enemy player. But you know, again, Shadow Shaman isn't as bad as he used to be.
Well, it'd be hard to be as bad as he used to be. It was.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad.
It was awful. Literally anything would have been an improvement. So I'm kind of happy to see this. I'm surprised because I talked about this a little bit, but I thought maybe Ether Shock would be a good replacement. That's a good burst damage. Not a lot of troll units actually provided burst beforehand, right? But yeah,
Right.
I mean Hex being buffed is also very solid. Keeps the unit out of the game. It's not Doom. It's more of the equivalent of a break. But yeah, again, nothing can compare to a Doom, so.
Definitely not. So we still see G Ryzen opting to pick up the Pudge, who was kind of nerfed. You know, his cooldown on his hook ability has been essentially doubled at level 1 and almost doubled at level 2. But also his alliances both have been nerfed. So that was kind of the more indirect nerf to Pudge, with Heartless and Warrior both being nerfed. That being said, he's still a very valuable unit with the ability to hook out key units from the opponent's backline, even if it's just once. You know, if you hook their Sniper in this case, or he's hook their Underlord, that can easily turn the fight, even if you only get 1 off per fight.
Exactly, right? And the thing about Pudge is that you only need 1 hook anyway, but in the early game, 2 or 3 hooks in a single fight is a lot. That's a lot of damage, and that's a lot of displacement, especially when you have few units, right? If you get hooked 2 of your core essential units, obviously that'll be a massive problem. And we see that there's 2 1 HP units on the board of G Ryzen. Here, he might actually win this because the opposing Hoblin refuses to attack.
That is the power of the Hex. You know, the Hex does last for 6 seconds, and in the meantime, that Hobgen is not doing anything. Meanwhile, a 1 health Shadow Shaman, 1 health Pudge, and G Ryzen's Hobgen get to clean up. So G Ryzen, we started off with an 0-2, and for further evidence that the early couple rounds don't matter too terribly much, he's on top with a big win streak, currently in first place, going into round 10 here.
I did have a theoretical analysis if potentially everybody is a Hobgen, right? Because that is something that's possible. But if there are no Anisics in the game, that basically means that you kind of have to consider your options with how much damage you're doing. because you can go all in for that raw damage with Hobgen and just hope you burst something, or you can potentially, obviously you can't play defensively with Hobgen, it's just kind of difficult,
Right.
but you can potentially use him as a supercharge machine, right? If you have a hyper carry in the back, you're not necessarily looking to burst, but rather
Yeah.
just buy time to get that supercharge off,
Hmm.
then get your hyper carry into the game. Like for instance, let's say if this Bat Rider was 2-star or something, and that sticky napalm stack was being spread out a bit more, that Bat Rider would be hitting very hard, very fast. So it's just
So
something to consider.
so
Hobgen
my
overall.
very first game of the New Balance patch, I had recorded it, put up on my YouTube, and I was playing Hobgen with the supercharge, and I was using a Venomancer as a hyper carry, a Savage in the
Oh,
backline. I had 4 Savages, and at one point that Venomancer, when you like clicked on him and hovered over him, the DPS number on that Venomancer was like 1,200 DPS. It was
yep.
nutty.
It is. It's quite hilarious because again, I mean, we talked about this right in the about Venomancer. We did not expect Venomancer to become MVP because he's a savage and a ranged unit that also has very good base attack speed. He can certainly turn into a monster, and with Hobgen, I mean, before this buff on Hobgen, he was Venomancer. Hobgen was already this monstrous sort of. I wouldn't say cheese because it's not really cheese. It's just a good
Right.
composition to have. But yeah, like it's absolutely crazy how much damage Venomancer can do. Unfortunately, no Venomancers in this board. I don't think.
No,
Actually,
not yet.
Momoring and Croak do have Venomancers, but they're not quite strong enough to actually output the damage. And
Yeah.
speaking of output the damage, this is kind of what I mean. Is that in a Hobgen v Hobgen lineup, you kind of need to have your units that do damage, and it looks like G Ryzen just didn't do enough here. As of course, he was against Hunters, so I'm presuming the
Yeah.
Hunters just
I,
did enough.
yeah, moving over to Glucose side, who just took down G Ryslin. Glucose here has a 3 Hunters, 3 Warrior Core, and is still opting with the Heartless. It's pretty easy to get that with Hunters and Warriors between Pudge and Drow Ranger, who are two definitely staple units. Also has a 2-star Beastmaster, which is pretty early on for that, and it's going to be racking up kills. Already has 12 kills already. And if you can turn on the Brawny bonus later on, it's now shared between all of the units. And with all the Brawnies in the pool, they actually do have the Brawny online now with the Juggernaut to replace one of the Warriors. So they're going to be nice and tanky going through here. And in the long fights, that Beastmaster is going to output a ton of damage.
We see some unique comparisons here for front lines, right? I mean, unfortunately, Spieler, who he is fighting right now, only has Brawny units, no damage output in the back, so he's kind of relying on this front line of brutes to do his work. But there is no damage output, so
Yeah,
unfortunately,
that's what we had
that
mentioned in before the match started with Brute's weakness is they can't access the backline. This sniper is just going crazy. This sniper is untouched. And how are you going to stop that? You don't have a defense as a Brute against a Sniper just going to town on you from the backline. Sniper top DPS in that fight.
Yeah, and another main problem there, right? Spieler didn't have a hyper carry, Hobgen could supercharge, or just any carry in general to supercharge in the back. So there was no opposing ranged carry for Spieler to actually just output damage against Glucose there, and there was there was nothing contesting that. And yes, brutes are very strong, but they're not very good at chasing down ranged units, right? Especially if they're supercharged.
No, they're not. And I want to bring up one thing here as we're watching Glucose. The interesting point is that Glucose only has 20 gold for interest, whereas almost everybody else in the lobby has 40 or 50 gold. And, yes, Glucose is on a win streak, and so that can kind of make up some of your gold, but they have a very expensive bench. Some Treant Protectors they're holding on to, some IOs, and some other various units that you could very easily sell off to get more gold. Do you think it's worth it to be really holding on to those units? And basically, they're paying rent. You have to pay a gold per turn if you have 10 gold on your bench and you're not getting enough interest.
I think a fact of the matter is, right. This is how you used to need to play Hobgen. This is like the old Hobgen style. Like especially when people counted him out. If you won the early game hard enough, you just ride that because he does so much damage. Especially if your composition already complements that, you will ride that win streak into the sunset, and then you just wait till you hit 50 gold. And I think that's his plan, right? Is that he has the opportunity to look for units now, and then when he's like, all right, my win streak is done, time to settle down, start buckling to upgrade my current units, then he'll kind of stop. And it's a old strategy that I used to employ. I'm not quite sure because of new Hobgoblin buffs that's necessary anymore. So yeah, I kind of agree that perhaps this wasn't the best idea at this point in time, but
Yeah.
you can never be too careful, I suppose.
Sure, sure, and I guess the logic is that eventually some of these units are going to be very powerful. We all know Treant Protector 2-star basically just wins the early game on its own. So holding on to a pair of those is definitely appealing. You got to think, oh, if I get one more Treant Protector, then he goes in and he's basically unstoppable in a lot of cases. And so I can see the appeal there, but there's definitely some concern that at what point do you say I could have sold that off 3 or 4 or 5 turns ago and gotten 5 or 10 more gold, because of all the extra
Exactly.
interest.
I do think that holding on to Shadow Demon and Shadow Shaman is a really bad idea. He's putting his hand into several cookie jars here, and
Yeah.
it's not gonna work out eventually, right? He is still on a win streak. I believe his +4 gold is next win.
No, it's
Or
at six wins right now, so it needs 2 more.
okay.
Meanwhile, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Amethyst down there has a 7-round loss streak, quite going the opposite direction. Now, I wanted to mention here on this creep round, we had pretty homogenous talent choices on round 10, which I was a little bit surprised by, but we see a little bit more diversity here on round 15 in terms of talent choices. What can you tell me about Hobgin from your perspective and the different talent choices?
So super fire break, because of that new buff, basically means your tanks will have 50% more HP. Obviously, that's not only your tanks, that's also your hyper carries. So I think what they're hoping for is they put a Mask of Madness on that hyper carry, then supercharge it. Then that supercharged unit now can probably out heal one source of damage at a time, which is very good. Supercharge fire break rather. That buff is actually super good in general.
Yeah.
Although I do believe that burn the house down is also a very good
That's
option.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's like kind of my default pick is picking burning down the house, which allows the fire to spread around on extra auto attacks. More fire means more hype generation for Hobgin, which means faster ultimates and also just more damage. So it's very surprising to see almost everybody going for that supercharge bonus, which did get buffed in the last patch.
Yeah, I think it's again because in this early standpoint, right? Hot rod plus burn the house down isn't just I wouldn't say it's the best combo anymore. Again, because fire break got buffed super hard, so
Sure.
I guess as the lords think about it, it's just more effective HP on those tanky units. And I did want to talk about the secondary tier of units, right?
Sure.
Sorry, tier of talents, right?
Yeah.
So hot rod,
Okay.
yeah. So hot, yeah. Sorry, the hot rod is always been a staple. It's personally one of my favorites because again, it scales Hobgin into the late game, makes him deal damage that otherwise you wouldn't really expect. Right? It's just faster attack speed, faster rates. Obviously, burn the house down pairs very well with that. So I can see why people would pick it up. Hobgin just becomes more damage output. Blazed and Spieler here, and also Crow picked up Grease Fire, which is also very solid because that means Explosivo actually generates so much hype for Hobgin. And I think that's because they want their Hobgins to cast spells anyway. Although they're probably going to pick up Let's Go Crazy at in a future round.
Do you think that I've always thought if you pick up Grease Fire, you want to be picking up Friendly Fire because you don't have that bonus attack speed from Hot Rod, and if you want to get to casting quickly, then you want to cast your Explosivo, gain the hype, and then cast Friendly Fire, and then go back to doing the rest of your casting, rather than if you don't have the bonus attack speed from Hot Rod, which pairs better with Let's Go Crazy.
I think I hope they take Friendly Fire. Actually, that would mean that they get that burst of damage earlier. But I think the logic here is that they'd rather sacrifice like an extra 18-90 attack speed for the chance that they get Let's Go Crazy faster. Which again, I haven't done the math on that, so I will have to double check if that's actually better than just taking Hot Rod, right? Because I don't think getting that faster will translate to more damage output for Hobgin because he already gets hype really quickly just because everything that's on fire generates hype for him. So
Well, speaking of things going quickly here, we see Spieler has got a supercharged Terrorblade 2-star with a Maelstrom and a Hunter buff, and that Terrorblade dealt a whole lot of damage in that fight, attacking so fast, dealing so much damage. Over 8,000 damage already.
Yeah, I just love to see Hobgoon supercharging anything, especially if it's a hyper carry like Terrorblade, as you mentioned, because then that Maelstrom Puck goes faster, he attacks faster, and he hits really hard. So it's great to see. And one more talent that was unique here, Amethyst went for Implosion, which is a double damage explosivo. Now, I don't really agree with this at this point in time. Well, today at least, because there are no mages, right? Explosivo gets amped by by mages,
Right.
and that's why people pick it up. It's that you'll have potential like 1600 damage amplified by mages, and Hobgoon becomes an extra mage in your pool.
Yeah,
But I think
especially since Amethyst here is
yeah.
going for a hunter build. As we're looking here, they have 3 hunters already, plus Heartless and Warriors, which has been a fairly common combination. There's not a lot of synergy there between the extra Explosivo damage and hunter builds.
I think the idea that he is going for is basically just uh, burst them as fast as possible. Of course, everyone went Fire Break, so everyone sort of has the damage resistance. So I guess the thought process is that if I kill them faster than Supercharge gets popped, then Fire Break won't really do much to benefit enemies, right? And
That's fair. That's fair.
and
But
I guess that's just the thought process, right?
yeah, and I guess it kind of goes with the hunter's strategy of we want to focus fire down individual targets. And what better way to focus fire than if you hit an explosivo that deals maximum damage on an isolated target? That target's going down really darn quick, and then that allows the hunters to kind of come and clean up and whittle down one at a time rather than all kinds of spread out damage. So I guess that's the logic behind that pickup. We see this lobby is relatively close. We got first place Momo Ring right now with 77 HP. Sixth place G Ryzen with 70 HP. So first through six is all within minuscule amounts of life between each other, and then Croak and Amethyst a little bit further behind at 44 and 55 respectively.
I think Croak's choice to go Grease Fire, especially when he's losing. Obviously, you can't predict the future, but I don't think Grease Fire was the best choice, especially since you're losing. I think something like Explosivo, like Amethyst did, is actually I actually agree. That is a much better choice, especially when you are behind. Yes, that kind of gimps you late game if you want that hard carry Hobgoon, but you gotta survive somehow, right? And if you keep losing like this, you're not gonna get there anyway. So, Grease Fire isn't the best choice when you're losing.
I guess that does make sense. If you're losing, basically it's a lack of damage mostly. You just don't have the damage output, and why not pick just the most damage increase in ability just to kind of stem the bleeding a little bit here. We see a pretty good division. We see, what is it, 4-4 between Friendly Fire and Let's Go Crazy, and as expected, everybody who picked up Hot Rod has picked up Let's Go Crazy, that good combo, but everyone who did not pick Hot Rod has picked up the Friendly Fire. So the 3 people picking up Grease Fire and the one on Implosion have picked up Friendly Fire.
If you can see me right now, I'm smiling ear to ear because I did really expect everybody to do Grease Fire, Friendly Fire, and Hot Rod to Let's Go Crazy. Some of the few things I theorized about Hobgoon was like, this is probably your build to go. But again, I'm kind of concerned for Croak here. Look at Amethyst, right? Implosion plus Friendly Fire does a lot of damage. Meanwhile, Croak TV pretty much has the same damage output as everybody else, who currently has a better composition than him. So my concern for him is that he will not deal enough damage just to offset his lose streak, and it just again, like he does have some work cut out for him. He just has to start winning some rounds, especially since he's committed to this standard build, I should say, right, rather than adjusting to fit his current needs, which is not losing. But again, I'm just so happy to see all of these talents picked up this way.
For sure, we see a couple people picking up Friends and Family Discount, which is not my favorite item, but if you can get it on round 20 with a Smuggler, that is extremely strong this early in the game. Both Alexa in first place and Spieler TG have picked that up here, and things are going to look really good for them. They're going to pay very little gold to pick up their units going forward.
In fact, free if you have a very low cost economy, right? Beastmaster would become 1 star and stuff like sorry, not 1 star, but 1 gold cost. Magnus become 1 gold cost. Trend Protector 2 gold cost, right? It just makes everything cheaper. And the thing to highlight is the fact that Axe is now free, and that's very nice, especially since that means you can just basically you can leave him on your you can essentially just pick him up regardless, and if you reroll into him, you can technically reroll the 0 and still find something you probably can use. So it's kind of great to see it that way. And continuing following Spieler here, he's actually fairly amping up, getting a good solid ground here. In fact, he's doing very well against G Ryzen here, who used to be at the top. Unfortunately, Friendly Fire not doing him any favors.
Yeah, we definitely see some. I was saying the game was very, very even before, but now it's seeming like we've got a couple people kind of pulling ahead, whereas the weaker teams are dropping health very dramatically. Let's hop over to Croak and see what's going on there. Down to 27 life already. That is not where you want to be on round 22. Does have a Warrior and Hunter comp, which has kind of been the most common composition today, or at least so far. We've seen 4 or 5 people here picking up hunters. There are so many hunters in the pool, right? So anybody picking up 3 hunters, it's very easy to be diversified, at least to some extent. So the competition on hunters is not the worst thing in the world. But we got to see Croak turn something around here, or else he might be heading for an early exit in the next couple rounds.
Yeah, again, his problem is that he went this Friendly Fire, Grease Fire build when he's losing. Grease Fire into Friendly Fire is, again, one of those things where you're like, I want to win these rounds harder. Right, and I genuinely think Double Explosivo would have done that more for him. Luckily for him, unfortunately, unfortunate for Amethyst here, his Medusa got instantly assassinated by Sniper, so
Yikes.
No Stone Gaze occurs, and unfortunately, no damage output there.
Yeah, normally you're very excited to get a Medusa this early on round 22, but if it just eats a Sniper ult to the face, well, that didn't do too terribly much now, did it? So Croak has stopped the bleeding, has turned around, and stabilized ever so slightly here. Did get a lucky... I'll say a lucky 2-star Lone Druid in that fight, just has a 1-star Lone Druid, 1-star IO, so a 50-50 on which one upgrades. Obviously, the Lone Druid is probably the preferred pick, just for that bigger bear, who is very powerful up in the front lines.
Yeah, I am very concerned. Eventually, he's gonna hit that 1-star Lone Druid, and then that's another, the bear will not be as tanky and will not buy as enough time. But as you say, right, these 3 hunters, his current 3 hunter lineup is actually probably, I think, pretty solid. Mirana Arrow is, in fact, it's if it hits a spray hard carry, that could change a fight around. So it's very solid to have this Mirana, even at 1-star. And in the meantime, he's actually gonna fight Alexa here. His front line's all 1-star, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the danger here. We see a lot of the players trying to transition to these higher cost units, the 4 cost units, and you kind of hit this power trough whenever you're trying to run 4 cost units like Bristleback or Mirana or something along those lines, and you just don't get up to 2-star just yet.
Oh my lord. So this was not. I'm not sure if you saw that, but Pudge actually hooked Mirana into an arrow.
That was insane. Yeah.
That was a good snipe. Actually picked off the Mirana instantly as that arrow connected. And although Hopkin died, unfortunately, Let's Go Crazy doesn't do very much when your entire front line is not tanky enough, right?
Right.
And we saw there, because they're all 1-star, they just can't buy enough time.
So the one thing I'll say is this lobby is still very, very close. Once again, Croak is a little bit below, but first place to 7th place is only 19 life total difference. That's really just 1 or 2 rounds difference. So nobody's running away with this game, and Croak's been winning the past couple rounds pretty convincingly. So maybe this will come right down to the wire, and it could be anybody's game for sure.
I would love to see everyone be at down to the wire, because that definitely means that there is some rock paper scissors action going on. But potentially we can swing either way. As we see in this fight against Croak TV and G Ryzen, Ravage actually comes out, connects on all the front line here. They're all dropping. Treant Protector gets his leech sheet off, not gonna even die yet. Shadow Shaman's still in the middle of the Drought Ranger, buying time. Sniper gets hooked in. Slardar's gonna go down. The front line's slowly collapsing here. Hopkin doing his best here, but remember, he skilled Friendly Fire. He's not even at that point where he can drop the ulti. He finally supercharges again. He finally drops that ulti, but is it too long, too late? As Rao in the back trying to do some damage control here, and there will be enough damage control. That did look bleak for a couple of moments, but Luckily, Croak does not lose as hard as I thought.
Kirk does go down, but only for 7 life, which is rather substantial when you only have 27. But you still have a couple rounds to play. You got a little bit of a respite here with the creep round coming up, so you get the round 25 talents, which seems pretty unanimous on molten armor here. We got everybody picking up the molten armor. Turns your Hobgon essentially into a tank, a frontliner who can just tank up some attacks, set some people on fire, and is pretty resilient to boot.
So the reason why this is alright, as far as I've seen, right, is that for people who go Let's Go Crazy, that means your Hobgon becomes even more Viper carry. For people who go Friendly Fire, it buys time for your Hobgon. So either or, it's a win-win to pick up Molten Fire. And another thing about sorry, not Molten Fire, Molten Armor, right? And also, again, that extra armor makes him, I mean, at this point, stronger than a warrior. So it is very solid to kind of have this buff on Hobgon, and I will be curious because I think we will have diversity into the late game. It might just be all silences, potentially, but there might potentially be some diversity depending on situation, because I believe level 30 is when you get that spark, which is
level 30 is Keep It Secret,
which is refresh ability, and that could be super useful in so many variants.
Possibly. I think the default seems to be going towards that, molten armor plus Keep It Secret, but we'll have to see how that all plays out here. Still feeling a little bit worried about Croak here. Definitely low on health at 20 health. Does have an Aegis of the Immortal, so can get buy an extra life. What I'm more curious about is Momo Ring up at the top of the standings here. Is running a whole lot of 1-stars, and yet is still holding on to that first place spot. That is very curious to see. They're winning so hard, but you can just imagine once you get up to 2 stars on some of these units, it becomes even more scary.
I want to point out a potential reason why he's still winning so hard. So if you look at his alliances, you have buy time. Oh, well, he removed the brutes, but he essentially had 3 different buy time conditions, and with a Hobgon that has Let's Go Crazy, that's enough, right? That's quite enough time to buy, and especially with a Ravage. Again, insects as well do a lot of damage, and I think that's the reason why he's winning so hard, is that he's just buying time for the Hobgon to get his ult off. Insects also doing this buying time sort of method, but he will be going against someone who has a Faceless Void, instantly gets Burrow Struck, but Chronosphere actually connects with everything, absolutely everything here. But unfortunately, all of the DPS for Blaze here attacking the Axe, so the work is not done the most, but it might have been enough here, as it looks like 2 bears will not change the outcome of this fight.
It's going to be close, but it looks like Alexa's probably going to walk away with this one with a slight win over Momo here. Most units go down, but damage taken is rather minimal, keeping the game still very close. It seems like everybody, the top 4 players are all between 50 and 57 life, so but the first to 4th place difference is very minimal indeed. There are more players joining Croak down in the flashing red life totals. We've got Glucose at 27 and Spieler TG also at 27. They got to be feeling a little bit of heat after dropping down that low.
And you can, I'm actually quite happy to see Croak finally stabilized, right? Like, I think Explosivo may have helped him stabilize faster. Like, if we compare him to Amethyst, right, who did that immediately while he was losing, he stabilized. He stabilized at 43 HP. Is sustaining. I'm gonna
say let's look at Spieler, who just hit 3 stars this turn. Just hit a 3-star Lifestealer, 3-star Beastmaster, 3-star Terrorblade. So I said you gotta panic a little bit. That was certainly a turnaround if I've ever seen one. 1 turn to get 3 separate 3-star units. That's really impressive.
The only thing he's missing is that if this Terrorblade gets supercharged, but of course, actually, now that the every unit is now forward. Oh, he supercharges the IO. Well,
not the best supercharged target.
not the best, but the Terrorblade is literally uncontested and empowered and finally supercharged. So as you can see, he's currently dealing 1,500, 1,700 damage. Friendly Fire, Friendly Fire. It's not gonna win you that round anymore.
Yeah, just a casual 20k damage Terrorblade. Beastmaster and Lifestealer 3-star. Normally, if you get one of those 2, they're your main carries throughout the fight. They dealt 5 times less than Terrorblade did when hooked up with that IO. Wow. That's all I can say about that last fight is wow. And Everybody else, Spieler looks a little bit low on life and is a little bit low on gold, but everyone else has a lot of catching up to do if they got these three big hyper carries along with a relatively resilient brute front line between Axe, Treant Protector, Magnus, and Lifestealer.
I think this is the upside to going brutes rather than warriors, right? Is that your front line actually does some damage, aside from the warriors who basically just buy you time. The brutes actually just absolutely deal damage on their own, which means the opposing front line will definitely eventually collapse, if not taken out by the opposing backline first. But again, we will see if this Terrorblade does his work here. He gets his Metamorph immediately. I'm waiting to see he gets empowered. The only thing left is Supercharge, but unfortunately, Hobgen has no hype as he was hexed, unfortunately.
Yeah, that Terrorblade has he briefly had whenever he multi-attacks, deals over 2,000 damage per second whenever he's multi-attacking with the Hunter bonus, and that is a scary Terrorblade. Already over 20,000 damage, and still going up.
Finally supercharged.
Finally dealing 1,200 damage per second, and that is just absolutely insane. Not to mention the crits from the Daedalus. That was an impressive showing. Another 33,000 damage out of that Terrorblade. This fight comes down to deal with Terrorblade or die.
Absolutely right. If there was anything that just stopped this Terrorblade from metamorphosing, the fight would have been lost because again, yes, you have that DPS carry for your team, but you have to think about it this way, right? If Terrorblade dies, where's your damage coming from? So
well, I mean, 3-star Beastmaster is not irrelevant. 3-star Beastmaster has carried plenty of fights in the past. He just doesn't get the chance because Terrorblade just eats everybody up first. And not to mention, they are one away from Magnus 3-star, who maybe is not the most solo carry, but does have a pretty powerful Empower effect, going up to 80% bonus plus 80% cleave. One away from that, two away from 3-star Sniper. This could be like a full 3-star lineup here in a few turns.
He will be going against Medusa and faces Void here. Chronosphere will be the turning point of this. And the Chronosphere is actually the sniper and the eye on the backline. The Terrorblade gets Stone Gaze, which means he will be dropping very soon here. No Metamorphosis, no healing to save him. And that is your damage output gone. It's now up to the Lifestealer, who is the only other 3-star in this game.
Io's coming back.
Relocate the Terrorblade.
He does!
Back to the dead. There is Metamorph back up, but he is silenced. But will that silence be enough? Another Stone Gaze coincidentally appears as soon as Terrorblade arrives.
Oh no!
He instantly gets petrified. And Croak will unfortunately, Alexa will unfortunately take that win against Spieler as Terrorblade gets petrified twice.
Wow, that AoE stun, not only from the Faceless Void hitting it initially and then buying time for the Stone Gaze, and then even bringing it back with Io is not enough because at that point the Stone Gaze was back up off cooldown. Hit him again, and like we said, if you don't get the Terrorblade to transform and be alone to deal the damage, it can be a very dicey fight. So here we see, as expected, everyone's picking up the Keep It Secret, kind of one of the most powerful talents in the game right now.
Yeah, it is essentially a free silence, prevents most frontline from casting anything. Explosivo is also a good exception because that just nullifies backline spells as well. This Explosivo with Silent Keep It Secret is especially effective against mages, but of course we don't see that here because Lina is banned. And Spieler actually does find that tier 3 Magnus that he was looking for, and we forgot to mention as well, he has friend and family discount, which means
it's true.
All of this money is...
That's how they're able to find so many, right? Is staying a lower level. Everyone else in the game is at level 9 or 10. Spieler has said, no, I'm going to stay at level 8. I've got a good composition here at level 8. I'm just going to reroll a lot to find my 3-star units at level 8 rather than trying to level up, spend that extra gold that wouldn't be used on buying units or wouldn't be used on rerolls. And hopefully, 4 3-star units with progress towards 2 more of them, hopefully that's enough.
Yeah, and I think what we should take a look at here is actually Amethyst, who's at 6 HP, and unfortunately, the items he picked up is 2 target dummies and a Daedalus, so it's kind of an issue here, is trying to stay alive. And by target dummies, I do mean the Tombstone, because that's what that is.
Well, the great items coming out here, anybody who had Smuggler had a chance to get a tier 5 item, and one of my favorite tier 5 items is Assault Cuirass, which is now on the 3-star Magnus.
Oh, I love that.
Absolutely amazing, just gets right in the middle of the fights, increases armor, shreds opponent's armor, decreases their attack speed. It's just such a powerful item with so many effects.
Yeah, and Yeah, and unfortunately for Amethyst, he does not get any of these win conditions items. Kind of had to rely on this Refresher's Tidehunter. But as we mentioned, everybody to keep it a secret, so we'll see how long this Tidehunter will last. Actually,
Seems
G
like
Ryzen puts his Hobgin right at the front, which is kind of an unusual play. This just means hype generates faster for Amethyst, but potentially was that the power play? There's a Gyrocopter in the background as well as a Sniper. Sniper gets a Sniper assassinates a Dry Ranger. For Warrior in the back as well, doing all of the damage, but Hobgin rapidly increasing that hype. He is going to get another Supercharge, but it's on the Pudge. That's not really what you want to have. Friendly Fire going to get dropped, and look at those bombs go. Actually eliminates 2 units instantly for the side of Amethyst. He might actually push forward here. Medusa's still alive. Gyrocopter is auto-attacking and finally takes a pick off. Gyrocopter gets a cooldown off. Finally, Gyrocopter and Tidehunter the only one surviving. Another Friendly Fire goes down, and the Gyrocopter has to get out of the way, and he doesn't. That Lethal Fire will pick him off here, and it's up to the Tidehunter, who has that Ravage, but he's silenced because he's on fire, and he's gonna get blown up as Amethyst manages to get that win.
Very long, drawn-out fight there that just barely leads towards an Amethyst victory. Still holding on for dear life at 6 life. Meanwhile, Glucose has been eliminated as our first player out in a very close game. Glucose, first one out, despite having a winning record of 12-11, just those 11 losses were a little bit too hard to handle and drops first. Although I would bet in the next couple turns we could see a couple more players joining Glucose down there in the elimination section.
Absolutely. Blazed actually, in a shocking turn of events, has splashed mages.
Yeah, I was gonna ask him, what is this composition doing? I saw this earlier on. It had some Bloodbound, it had some Druids, had some humans. It was just all over the place, but it seems to be working out for him.
Unfortunately, he will be going against Blazed here. Rather the yeah, we will definitely see, G Ryzen here, and we will see if this composition does enough. The Coddle, of course, doing as much damage as he can. There is a Friendly Fire, I believe, in his pocket, or did he go, let's go crazy? We'll definitely see here, but it looks like he was slowly turning this fight. Not exactly, as Hobgin finally falls here, and is only up to the Dragon Knight, unfortunately unable to attack 3 different targets at once.
Yeah, that is a 2-star Gyrocopter in the back line, just dealing big chunks of damage. Blaze does not take a fatal amount, just takes 5 damage here, but we still have everybody living on a knife's edge. One bad fight could knock out pretty much anybody here. Maybe Alexa's a little bit secure from that, but pretty much everyone else is within 1-shot range at 20 or less life.
Blaze did go Friendly Fire, just so that damage is amped from the mage buff. But the thing I'm concerned about is the fact that he put him in the front. He's gonna get shot, and he's gonna die before Friendly Fire goes. And I don't think I saw Friendly Fire go off in that fight for him. I'm not quite sure. Someone could correct me on that.
I'm not sure, but I think the logic with placing Hobgin up front, and especially surrounded by some other units, is that it'll be a little bit hard to focus fire him whenever, some people are still going to split their attention over to the Treant on the left or the Alchemist on the right. But then people who do attack him are going to get silenced due to the Molten Armor combo. Here we see him up against Spieler's Ghost here, the Spieler with all of the 3-star units, and the 3-star Terrorblade has unlocked and looks to be doing some work here.
He is ditched, however, by the IO, so the Coddle Blast will kill him, and there's no resurrection this time. It's about the Sniper at this point. Assassinate comes out, takes out the Coddle. Friendly Fire going to get popped as well, but it's not going to be your main source of damage. Remember, Hobgin does not have the Let's Go Crazy, so he's not going to do that crazy amount of damage that we usually see him do. He's going to be up to Explosivo and Friendly Fire to do the damage, but it's not going to be enough here for Blaze, or rather for Spieler's Ghost, and Blaze will stay alive.
Will stay alive, and Amethyst has been knocked out by G Ryzen, so that composition with the 2-star Gyrocopter out of G Ryzen is just doing a lot of work. A lot of work there for G Ryzen and that Gyrocopter, as well as a Mirana who has an Octarine Essence. That's an interesting choice on her. She can cast her Stunning Arrow much more often with that.
That is actually almost a theoretical permanent arrow, because that is a 5-second stun onto a 5-second cooldown, which is quite a crazy thing to look at. Is just how dangerous that can be. And we will follow G Ryzen here as he will be fighting Alexa. Unfortunately, this is the 2 highest boards in the game, so I will jump to Spieler versus Momoring here. I do want to see who will take this cake here. Terrorblade actually gets hexed in this board, finally gets the Metamorphosis off, and immediately shreds the axe, and he's pushing through. Dragonite's gonna fall next, and this Hunter buff on this Terrorblade doing so much work, but again, the IO leaves just before the Terrorblade can finish the job. Let's see if that is a massive detriment, or if that's perfectly fine. There's a Sven on the left-hand side.
Terrorblade survived.
But it doesn't look like it's enough, and Terrorblade survives, as you said, and that's gonna be a
That
victory
should knock
for
out
Stealer.
Momo or possibly pop an Aegis.
Or
Pops
Aegis.
Momo Aegis. And in the meantime, Blaze goes down. Blaze at one point had an Aegis, but I guess that has been popped by Croak and is now out. So Blaze takes 6th place in this very, very close game. Really anybody's game at this point. Everybody is within one shot range, really.
Yeah, it's all about rock, paper, scissors at this point, right? There's several variants. Momoring, actually, this is from a surprising turn of events, picked up a Sven. I'm not sure if it's for the scaled buff, but that... actually, no.
Look at how many buffs Momo has active. That is like the most I think I've ever seen. There are 9 alliances active right now on Momo. You've got Demon.
He doesn't...
Okay.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, he has no, no missing alliance. All of his units have an alliance buff active. He is forming the Power Rangers. This is so crazy. Imagine if he could put a Legion Commander in here. She would still be useless, but she'd be applying all of these buffs at the same time. So
it's crazy with 9 different buffs active. That is absolutely insane. You see just so much synergy here. You've got the CC out of the Tidehunter and the Sand King, backed up by damage dealers in the form of Dragon Knight, and you can even buff that Dragon Knight when Sven casts. So it's just really, really crazy at this point.
Yeah. The main reason I think Sven was picked up so that he could God Strength and give that Dragon Knight an extra 50% damage, which is it doesn't feel like a lot, but that's 100. He goes from dealing 200 damage a hit to 300 damage a hit, which is a lot of DPS output, especially with a dataless splash. So he's hoping to see if that will change the fight for him. Obviously, previously he was unable to do so.
Unfortunately, Momo has to pick up a very bad item here in that Dagon. Probably one of the worst items in the game right now. The damage output from Dagon does not really keep pace with the increased health totals of units nowadays. And on the flip side, they're going to be going up against a Gyrocopter who has a Bloodthorn on, which is one of the better items.
Absolutely, but Hoglin Ministry goes down here. Again, that hype will immediately ramp up, but both players actually opted to put their Hoglin in the front line. Finally pops that Let's Go Crazy, but I think it's a little bit too late here. It's about the Dragon Knight dealing the damage, but he gets hooked in the front line. Front line damage is not there, though. Finally goes down, and look at all of these units. They're all so low, and they're not going to do enough damage to actually keep Momoring in this fight. Arrow comes in on the Shadow Demon before he gets that break off. Lone Druid going to get that second bear out, but it's not going to be enough here, as just too many hard carries still survive. 4G Ryzen.
And Momo is out in 5th place. That 2-star Troll Warlord, despite the slight nerfs that came out last patch, turns out 2-star Troll Warlord is still a pretty good carry in most cases here, and the Gyrocopter no slouch as well. We're down to our final 4. We've got G Ryzen, Spieler TG, Alexa, and Croak rounding out our top 4 here. Let's move on over to Croak, who's got a Medusa 2-star with the Bloodthorn.
Oh my, does that split shot? I don't even know if that's
well, yes, it does. It increases your attack damage, so your attack damage will increase, and Bloodthorn will trigger every 10 seconds, assuming Medusa is still alive, to silence opponents who are about to cast. So really, really powerful item to put on a Medusa 2-star.
That is absolutely absurd. We will be seeing which Medusa is superior here, but there's a Faceless Void in the backline. If that Faceless Void is not silenced, that will be devastating. And that Chronosphere actually lands on all the hard carries. On the left-hand side is completely going to get decimated here. There is no backup from the hard carries. Hard carries is going to finally come back alive here, but the opposing Hoglin is already dead. But, however, Alexa's Hoglin is still standing, trying to get that supercharge off. He finally gets it on the Medusa, but the arrow gonna fly. He's gonna hit the Lich, but Lich already done his job. And look at these hard carries. They're doing too much damage here. It's all about the Hoglin. The Mirana leaps backwards straight into another Gyrocopter missile. Assassinate gonna finally land, but he gets silenced. It's up to the Mirana, but Mirana is stunned for years, and that Hobby's gonna survive. Just barely for Alexa.
Just barely. Only 3 damage dealt. There is still an Aegis on Croak's side here to hold on, even if there would be a loss for that that damage. On the other side, Alexa has completed a 2-star Faceless Void with a Refresher Orb. So if you thought that Chrono Cube for 4-second stun was too much, now you're going to be stunned for 10 seconds in that Chrono Cube, assuming 2 casts come off relatively quickly, back to back.
Oh no! I mean, okay, for that last fight, the last fight, 1 Chrono Cube was not enough, right? So maybe
Correct.
2 is the charm. He just needs to buy more time. He in the span of them being in the Chrono Cube, he was unable to kill everything, and we will see him. We will see Croak actually fighting Alexa once again here. We will see if that Chrono Cube will be enough. Oh, actually no, Alexa won last time, so maybe this
Just
Chrono
barely.
Cube is
Yes, just
yeah,
barely.
just barely. Another Chrono Cube. Actually, Chrono Cube gets casted twice immediately. That's completely bugged, I think, because he really wanted that Chrono Cube to be staggered.
Yeah,
and
being delayed.
unfortunately for him, it is not the case, and it looks like Alexa is gonna get completely wiped here unless the Hobgin can do enough significant damage. But the Mirana arrow lands. It's not enough damage.
But not enough. Alexa still survives. It is a nail biter here with Alexa and Croak both at 2 and 3 health, very easily one shot away. I believe Croak still has that Aegis, but G Ryslin seems to be in a great position to actually take down this game. Still has an Aegis backup and has 21 health to boot, as well as a 2-star Gyrocopter with that Bloodthorn, a 2-star Tidehunter with a Bracers of Desperation, and just all kinds of damage and defense from a 6 warrior buff.
It's gonna be very, very close. Croak and Alexa. At this point, Alexa really has that has his work cut out for him. I don't think I've seen him fight G Ryzen yet at this point, and G Ryzen is currently a dominant force. So
yeah, Alexa, she is definitely at risk here. Is probably the most likely to be eliminated on any given fight. Is facing up the ghost of G Ryzen here. So let's see if Alexa can make her way out of this situation.
The Chrono Cube finally lands here. The refresher Chrono Cube again immediately popped. So once again, that is not staggered. That Chrono Cube is completely wasted once again. Rather, Chrono Cube was only casted once this time because the refresher was not put on him. But it will not look like it will be enough. All the front line has been silenced, so that refresher's orb is completely useless. And there's just not enough damage for Alexa. G Ryzen will take this one in the bag. Meanwhile, Croak TV versus G Ryzen here. We will see if Croak is managing to survive against G Ryzen. And in fact, he does. She wins with alacrity. Actually, no, rather, G Ryzen wins with alacrity and breaks Croak's Agent. And we will see if Croak has any outs here.
Down to the final 2, and it seems like G Ryzen just has all the cards at this point. They will be going to a creep round here on round 40, so another chance to get a new item. Perhaps could change the tides, but it certainly seems like G Ryzen is in the driver's seat here, has the better units, has the win streak, has 6 warriors, which was not nerfed in the patch, despite warriors in general being nerfed. 6 warriors is still just as strong as it was before the patch, and it seems like Croak is in a bit of trouble in that regard, since most of their damage is physical damage based.
Now Croak, we can't count him out yet because of the smuggler. This round, if he wins, he will have a 90% chance for a tier 5 item, which means Rapier. He also has the Embarrassment of Riches, which means he has 4 chances to get a Rapier. So
yeah, that is one of the items that could certainly change your fate here. Get a Divine Rapier and just make your hyper carry even hyper carrier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I get what you mean. And absolutely, he's gonna need every damage outsource he can get because G Ryzen, again, his composition just does so much. Gyrocopter, Troll, and Sniper feel like they have his number, unless he gets some divine intervention.
We shall see. What are they gonna pick up? I think Divine Rapier is probably the best thing that Croak could hope for here to try to turn the tides of the fight. A Divine Rapier on a 2-star Medusa definitely does so much damage. G Ryslin picks up Divine Rapier, and quite the opposite. Croak does pick up Desperate Measures, which is definitely at its strongest right here at 3 life total. But G Ryzen picking up a Divine Rapier to slap that on a Gyrocopter, who's going to be targeting the lowest health due to the Deadeye, and piercing shots due to the Ace of Deadeye bonus. Oh, I'm just terrified of this Gyrocopter.
So I will just explain what will happen. Drow Ranger will instantly die, then the Sniper will instantly die, then the Viper will instantly die, and then the game is just over after that point. Because he has to kill that Gyrocopter somehow, and he cannot let his Tidehunter get silenced. He has to get that Ravage off the Gyrocopter, and he is in the second row, which means there is a potential chance here for that Ravage to land, but the Tidehunter doesn't move forward. The Sniper gonna go down here, so Gyrocopter's not contested, no stun's gonna go off, and both of them go down. Viper's gonna go down next, and he's finally gonna end. Call down, gonna land on 2 units, but it looks like Gyrocopter has to die here. He's doing way too much damage. There's not enough contestation. The Troll Warlord isn't even the main vocal point here. Explosivo gonna land, but Gyrocopter, so close actually. Friendly fire, gonna land. It's almost gonna kill the Gyrocopter. The splash kills him. The Troll Warlord goes down as well, and Croak steals the Divine Rapier.
Oh my god, he steals the Divine Rapier, survives. That could be the entire game here. You take the risk, you buy the Divine Rapier, you just assume that, yep, I'm gonna just win this round, but instead Croak turns the tide, steals the Divine Rapier, gets his own 2-star Gyrocopter, and is gonna throw this Divine Rapier on the Medusa with split shot. It's insanity.
I made a stupid mistake, G-Rising comment, as he drops the Rapier, and now Croak still has a Rapier in his pocket. He's really thinking about this.
It's got to go on the Medusa, yeah.
On Medusa. That is a split
oh
shot.
My goodness.
480 damage. Oh my god. This is so crazy. This has to be a turning point. G-Ryzen has to be sweating out of his boots at this point. He picks up the Faceless Void. The Corner Spirit could change his fight because, again, Gyrocopter's going to eliminate the Sniper, and then the Viper, and then the Drow Ranger straight after. But the Medusa is uncontested. It's going to get stunned, but it might not be enough.
The damage isn't there.
Gets a Stone Gaze off the front line. There's no damage. Croak has lost. Sorry, G-Ryzen has lost all sources of damage, and he's going to get landslide victory. That Rapier pickup actually threw the game for him.
G-Ryzen still had an Aegis. This is still going. There's still another shot, but you got to think with how decisive that fight was that it's going to be real hard for G-Ryzen to come back from this after stealing that Divine Rapier. Oh my goodness, that fight did not even look remotely close.
Okay, I just need to highlight this. The Medusa actually mathematically is doing 620 damage because Desperate Measures is amplifying that. That is a 620 damage Medusa split shot. And that is on 3 targets. And if that Hunter split shots, that is disgusting. In fact, because of that Desperate Measures, it offsets what split shot actually negates, which means this Medusa is doing full damage to everything it hits. Unfortunately, it's too far away. Faceless Void gonna jump in again. Drow's gonna die off immediately. So will be the
big Chrono Cube.
Actually lands on the front line. The Medusa is uncontested though, and all of the enemy units, G-Ryzen's units got Chrono Cube. That's a disaster. There was no damage output. The Medusa still stands. She's stunned for a split second, but it won't be enough. Call down opposing the enemies will take everyone out, and that will be Croak TV.
Wow.
The Divine Rapier steal into a comeback. G-Ryzen has to be kicking himself.
How about that? Croak was one of the lowest health total early on. Remember when we were saying Croak is down at 27 life and we got to be really worried that they're going to be eliminated early on? Pulls off a massive comeback, not only to get to the top 2, but then to get to the Troll round, pick up the Divine, or pick up the Desperate Measures, and then pick up a Divine Rapier on the end of that. That is absolute insanity. Congratulations to Croak for winning the first round here of our Underlords Pro Season 3 Grand Finals. All right. Wow, that is just an insane game, and I do not know what to say about that, other than I hope every single one of our games goes exactly that way.
That was the first game, and that was on the B group. I'm not sure how crazy Group A went as well, because that was ridiculous. That was such a clutch fight. That's absolutely crazy. And it's absurd how close that was. And there's someone in the chat that keeps asking for a shout out. It's Clementine Snap, I think. Related to Gear Snap somehow. But yeah, shout out to that. But yeah, that was so crazy. That Rapier turnaround, I was like, he could secure this. Is so close. If that Rapier did not drop, if he just did slightly more damage, that game would have been his. But no, Croak stole that, and then suddenly the fight was turned because that Rapier was suddenly giving the Medusa 600 damage on 3 targets.
Absolutely, an absolutely amazing game. I hope the remaining 3 rounds are just as exciting. We're going to take a really quick break here, and we will be back shortly for round 2 of the Underlords Pro League Season 3 Grand Finals. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a few moments.